Thank you for joining us for another episode of In the Flow with Robin, your spiritual CFO, and the Heart of Jessica with Jessica. Y'all, we're feeling the energy already. Jessica was leading us through some opening and some activation so we can come and chat with you guys today about the topic of release and how important it is to kind of almost be in a constant cycle of release. As we're growing, as we're evolving, we have to allow the things that are no longer serving us to fall away. So this is when we get in this cycle of continuing to be where we are, as well as preparing for the energy that is forthcoming in our lives and what that looks like around those cycles. So what has been your experience with releasing?
So I'm a Scorpio rising, and for me, that means constant. I've also have my North Node in the 8th house. So it is something that I grab onto and I just hug it. For me, stagnation, I would say not stability, but stagnation feels very threatening. So I am the one who like leaps into the deep end, diving headlong into change, into release. Yeah. And for me, I love the movement. I love the energy. So even, with release, there's that period where you're kind of in the in-between. That feels very uncomfortable too. I call it the chrysalis period where we're goo and we haven't been formed into what we are moving towards. But the older I get, the more I lean into that space. And, what do we do when we're goo in the chrysalis? We just relax, take care of ourselves, nurture ourselves, because the energy systems, the body is trying to figure out, and coordinate around what to do next. And I will say, like, I'm the radical, version of this change and desire to lean into and breathe it. And I have a very catalytic energy too. So I like to catalyze situations that are stagnant or stuck. I like to find those places and kind of put a finger on it and send a little bit of energy because I like to see that change and transformation occur. And that's in whether it's human design or gene keys or my chart, like that is the energy that I've brought to this earth, is to catalyze change and shift as we move into this new reality. So I've been experiencing that my whole life and get excited about it. I also know that most people are not as excited about it as I am, and that it can actually be quite earth-shattering and scary. And to just normalize that, like, it's okay. It's okay if you're not like, yay, let's everything fall apart and blow up and explode. Like, it's okay to not feel comfortable with that and honoring that space inside of yourself. There is this piece of acknowledging where we are. And interestingly enough, with the quantum is like, where is it that you want to be? And then it can just be like that. And Robin and I were talking right before about how things are not as hard as they've always been. We can move into that quantum space quickly. So there's not a need for apocalyptic change any longer. Things can transition very smoothly and easily for everyone. So very much so for those of us that have done work for a long time, but also for those of us that have not done work. There is this space for things to move easily. I can even see it in my relationships where in the past they would have exploded and the frequency was so different. And now what I'm seeing is those relationships are shifting in a very beautiful and harmonious way, which was not always available before. So that's my 2 cents for now.
I love it.
Yeah. How about you?
It's funny because now I haven't thought about it until this moment, but I want to, if you're open, I want to at some point look at our charts over top of each other because my midheaven is in Scorpio, which is, like helping. I feel like I also like to do that in myself, but also assisting other people with helping them to get to that like deep point of transformation. But it's ironic because I wasn't always so open to the fluidity of change and release. I was a person, I'm Capricorn rising, so I was very much like, nope, I'm comfortable here. I also have a stellium in Taurus. So very much like that earth, like in my comfort zone and not wanting to change. And about 8 years ago, I had, the universe had to come in and just kind of knock me on my butt because I was so stuck in what I thought my life was supposed to be and what I thought, that I desired out of life. But I'm thankful for it because it helped me to learn so many things. So sometimes release is hard for people, right? Depending on what phase of your life that you're in, depending on your natal chart, depending on so many factors. So one thing that I have found to be helpful for me, and also, sharing this with clients, is that we don't always have to know what it is that needs to be released, because I think sometimes we can get stuck in that. I even had a moment of that this week where I was getting signs from my angels and my guides that I was in this, chrysalis phase of like, all right, you're not yet in the next chapter. You're kind of in this phase of release, which I would imagine a lot of us are in right now since we're in springtime.
Yeah.
So when I was getting all up in my head about, well, what do I need to release? I don't even know what that is. I heard very clearly from my guides, you don't have to know. Just be open to, when you're meditating, when you're walking out in the woods, when you're, just being intentional with asking for support from the universe. I know that I'm meant to be releasing something. Please help me in releasing that. It really just takes our willingness a lot of times just to say, hey, I'm not sure what this is, but I feel this shift coming. I feel like things are wanting to kind of fall away. And I would also say it's good to have those periods in your life where you do kind of take stock of your relationships and the things that you're putting your time and your energy and your life force into. If you've been in a situation that isn't really lighting you up anymore and you can kind of feel like it's ready to fall away, it can be scary to do that, right? We hold on to things that aren't really serving our highest and our best because we're afraid of what's on the other side. We're afraid of being in that void state. That void state is still a little bit hard for me. I feel I've gotten, I've improved with it, but it's hard for me not to know. Like, I'm a person, I want to know, right? So I'm like consulting my cards and I'm, trying to like find out like what's the next phase going to bring. But it can also be really powerful to just lean into, I don't know what the next phase is, right? And there's also beauty and like excitement in that of trusting and honoring that the universe is probably going to bring us things more beautiful than we ever imagined if we can just lean into, okay, there is a process to this, right? I have to release, be in the kind of void stage, because part of being in the void stage is allowing your energy to recalibrate after you've released all of that. So you're cellularly, you are changing your body, your energy, your mind, your heart, your soul. It's all changing as you release those things and then opening you up to these new opportunities that are wanting to come in. So do you want to chat about like things that have helped you with releasing?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Well, and let me say one more thing too, because it is about being in the unknown around releasing, but also not knowing where we're going.
Yeah.
And I will say that is one of the most uncomfortable things for me. I've always known where I'm going. I have a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year plan. I have a life plan. And the more I have leaned into, been in spirituality, the less I have a clue about what it is. But I get signs. I had a vision 10 years ago that said, when you turn 40, your life is going to change. I didn't know what that meant, but that was all I needed to know, was like everything was going to be drastically different and I was going to be moving into a different space. Has it unfolded in the way that I thought? Not at all, but I won't lie. I held on to that for 10 years and it got me through every day, every challenge, because I knew that there was something guiding me towards a higher mission. So that's where I will say, it's okay if you don't know anything, if you don't know what to release and you don't know where you're going and you don't know what's happening. And I've kind of held on to this idea of being comfortable in the discomfort. And at every stage of my life, at different periods of my life, that has meant different things. it literally was being very uncomfortable in the physical, whether it was physical injury or uncomfortable relationships or uncomfortable living situations. And now for me, that discomfort has moved into discomfort of knowing where I'm going, not having all of the answers, but also falling back in. And when I lean back into my divine line, my hara, my alignment, I see I'm there, and I see those synchronicities, like you're on the right path. There is a breadcrumb, a spiritual, I will say not breadcrumb trail, but a spiritual crystal trail that I see, okay, there's another one and there's another one. And so that has been revolutionary for me to trust and allow and to lean back into following whatever that is. So it may never make sense, but there are beautiful moments where I'm just like, yep, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be and I feel it. So back to your question, what are some things that we can do for release? So for me, I was born on a full moon, and as a result, the lunar cycle is very important. You don't have to be born on a full moon for it to be important. But for me, that was like, oh, when I found out I was born on a full moon, because everybody's like, oh, you should try lunar cycles. And I'm like, I don't know about all that. And I'm like, well, here the universe was like, yes, you do, because you were born on a full moon. So pay attention. So I need things, I need really loud and bright and, kind of excessive communication at times. So that was that. It's like, we've been telling you, we've sent you people, you were not listening or paying attention. So apparently AstroSeek had to help you out, which it did.
Yeah.
So that's where I would say I love the lunar cycle. The new moon is where we can plant our intentions. We get to choose which area of life we want to move into. And so for me, like, yes, you can use the lunar cycle exactly like the moon is in this, and I'm going to use it for that. And it really does kind of drill down into where that's happening. So you can use that direct guidance from the astrology about the collective energy coming in. I tend to color outside the line. So I'm like, I'm really wanting to work on this because I'm feeling called to do that. So I'm going to use the new moon energy to do a very simple, ceremony, light a candle. My intention for this lunar period is to grow this seed. And, calling in my angels, putting some crystals out. That's one of the things I love to do is like picking a crystal. Like this is the crystal that exemplifies what I want right now. So that when I look at it, when I see it, it's like, yep, I'm still doing that thing. And you can, write it down on a piece of paper, put some Reiki symbols, put a crystal on it, leave it there to remind you of what that, affirmation or that intention is. And it can be really simple. So there it is, my crystal. I like to go out and look at the moon or lack of moon, grounding it deeply into the earth. And then I just blow out my candle and I've done it. I have grounded my intention into my being and into my reality. And then same thing when the new full moon comes is what's happened since the new moon. Like, so what shift has happened? Maybe it's not completely, but we can see signs that it's moving. And then just celebrating that and releasing on that full moon, like what cords do I need to cut? What do I need to give up? What do I need to take in? What changes need to happen in order for me to move further towards my desired goals? You can do that with a releasing ceremony. I like to write all the things I'm ready to get rid of, burn it, put a little sage on it, throw it out in the yard after it's, out of fire and all of that. But really simple ritual around the moon to help me shift. And it's just putting my intention, for me, ritual is about finding my intentionality, putting it on that thing and just saying, hey, universe, I'm in alignment with this change and join me in with that change. So that's one of them. How about you?
I mean, and actually, thank you so much for, it's funny because I think sometimes we can forget the really obvious things, like I'm so connected to the moon. My moon is in Cancer. And for a while I was being very intentional with the moon cycles, but I've probably been using the full moons more than I have the new moons, just because I feel those a lot more.
Yeah.
I feel those like somatically a lot more. But yeah, I love that reminder for sure. Sorry, the dog is like, yeah. Anyway, so squirrel. The one of the big ones for me is writing. So writing letters to people, writing things that I want to release, burning as well, if that feels in alignment. So writing letters, burning them. I go to the beach and walk a lot. Like I like having that physical component with it. So I go for like walk and talks. I'll go for a long beach walk and just I'll talk out loud, or I'll kind of allow myself to process like what I'm feeling, what I'm struggling with. Um, Taking baths as well, like being very intentional with an Epsom salt bath, and just, same thing, putting the crystals in there intuitively, using the essential oils. And just while I'm in the bath, like I'll imagine, I'll say it out loud sometimes. Actually, a lot of times I will, like, please help me to release anything that's not serving me. It can be like we can take mundane things and turn them into very spiritual activities with our intention and with just a little bit of ceremony or intention. What's the other word? Like ceremony or
Ritual.
ritual. Thank you. But the other thing that I want to share with you about that, something that my mentor kind of drove home for me, and I get to remember this because sometimes I don't always, is like closing down the energy when you're done. So it's important, right? We open these portals, but we need to make sure that we're mindful about closing them. So just at the end, just saying thank you to your guides. I'm closing the space. Thank you for coming. If it is something that you want to keep open, if you're doing like a new moon ritual, and you want to keep that space open, just kind of either setting, you can just say to your angels, like, can you please close this when you're done? You can set a reminder for yourself, to go back and close it, but just being intentional with those spaces that we open energetically. Let me see what else for releasing. Fire to me is really magical for releasing. So I was in these women's groups a couple of years ago, and we moved through the elements. So we would start out in fire, and it was a lot around burning, what was no longer serving us. So having that physical representation, so you can take little pieces of paper. This is a good way to move through fear also, which I feel like fear can definitely be invoked when we're in these periods of release. Right? Like it's the fear that tends to make us want to hold on to these things. It's like, oh, I don't want to end this relationship. I don't want to end this job because, what if I don't get something else? Or what if I hurt this person? Or, all the what ifs and the fear that can come up. So just sitting down very intentionally with a fire safe bowl, a lighter, some paper and a pencil, and just, I would tear off, I have paper here, so to show you, I would tear off like little pieces of paper. And on one side, I would write the thing that I was afraid of. And on the other side, I would write what I wanted to call in. So for instance, if I'm afraid of leaving a job, I would write, I'm afraid that I won't have the money that I desire. And on the back side, I would write, I'm calling in abundance or prosperity. And then I would just take the lighter, light it, and release it. There's something that's very powerful about having that symbolic action behind it that can really help you, because I feel like it also helps you to get clarity too, and like to understand the things that you're struggling with. When they're up here, it's really hard to kind of move through them sometimes. Like it can get very jumbled when it's in our head, but like putting them down onto paper is always very helpful for me. So yeah, probably a lot of writing and like asking questions as well. So if you're having a hard time surrendering or releasing, because I feel like surrender goes along with release.
Yeah.
You can ask yourself a question like, why am I afraid of releasing this job or this relationship? And just allow yourself to write. Burn it when you're done, right? Especially if you live with somebody else, maybe you don't want little pieces of paper floating around that have all your deepest, darkest secrets in it. And again, just kind of release that to the universe. Yeah, those are my favorites.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and you brought up the great idea of gratitude. Gratitude is such a huge thing, just it's acknowledging that you're seen and heard. So the universe is always there. Our angels, our guides are always there. And they're like, hey, are you paying attention? So when we say, hey, I want this thing and thank you for helping with it and help me move on my mission and in alignment. And then we see the synchronicities, just opening up with that gratitude and saying, I see it. That's that communication. Gratitude helps us, and sending love is that communication that we have with that realm outside of ourselves. So like Robin said, when we're setting intentions, when we're doing ceremony or ritual, closing that space off And the other aspect too, I love the closing the space off, because it's like, okay, I did what I needed to do and now I'm handing it off. I am not in the driver's seat. I don't need to be in the driver's seat. I know that the universe will organize itself around those desires that are in my alignment and move forward with it. And I have gratitude for that. Thank you all. And I'm going to let you do it. I'm not going to worry about it. And for me, the reminder is just like, oh, thank you. Thank you for helping me with this. Please show me synchronicities. And I will say, as I continue to do work, more and more, I'm like, is this an alignment or not? And if it's not an alignment, I'm not even going to put it down there as an intention. But in the past, I would do that. Like, I really want this thing. And sometimes it wouldn't happen. So in my opinion, that is less about, oh, well, I'm not in contact with them, and more about I'm not in contact with my own alignment about how to move forward. So we have to be really connected around that. So it's like, for me, the intention has been like, how am I moving forward with my business? I don't need to know what that looks like. I just say, I'm ready. I'm ready to step in and do that. So show me like how we're going to expand in this way. So I leave that intention. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here. Not anything I ever would have thought. Some of it I may have been resistant to in the past. And now I'm like, okay, I'm open, like show me the way and make it easy and make it full of fun. Because when we are in alignment, it may not always be easy for our limiting beliefs, but it is easy to create. Like it just happens. And Robin brought up a really good point about this limiting beliefs. Every single step of this is looking at our fears, our limiting beliefs. Figuring out what that's about in writing is a great way to just allow stuff to move through us, or even talking it out, whatever we need to do to really get into contact with what's going on. And for me, that's been huge. I have a very strong mind, and that is an amazing, huge asset, but it's also not easy because I can think my way through anything. And it's like, Jessica, we've got to break this down. We've got to break this down. It is not helping you.
Yeah.
So just being open to allowing my mind to be flexible and, like they say, having that neuroplasticity and being open. And that's been my biggest, like, this year has been ease and flow, but also pushing capacity. So I want to feel that growth edge, and I feel it like, oh, I'll be in a meeting. I'm like, oh, I just hit it. Are you going to expand or are you going to close down? And I'm like, all right, we're doing this. Like, I'm going to open up and I'm asking for help to move through it. And it is so beautiful when that happens. So yeah.
I love it when like little insights come in as we're chatting, because I feel like I learn so much as we talk. I want to go back to when Jessica and I were both talking about getting those breadcrumbs and those signs from the universe. Because there can be a lot of fear when we're releasing, it's important to like center ourselves and to be open to the guidance that's coming. But a friend of mine has shared this with me a few times lately, and it's really, I love doing this. Like the fact that she has been intentional with asking the universe for this, I think is really beautiful. If we are struggling with not being sure, right, what's actually in alignment for me, what is actually wanting to change and to shift in my life, if you feel like the messages that you're getting aren't clear enough, you can ask your angels like, yo, I'm not getting this. Can you please make it more, what's the
I say louder, please.
Yeah,
Turn
louder,
up the volume.
clearer, yeah, louder, clearer, make it very obvious. Actually, I have done that before. Like sometimes I just forget it. So actually, when I got my dog, I was, I had like people telling me like, oh, I see animals in your field. And I love animals, but at the time I just was like, I don't really want an animal. So I said to the universe, I'm like, if you want me to do this, like you need to make it very obvious. So the universe did, right? It can be like really powerful to have, because we do have resistance to things sometimes that we end up like really loving and enjoying later on. So it's almost like we're trusting the universe and saying, okay, my ego and my will is telling me like, I don't really want this, but I'm going to be open and trusting enough that I'm going to allow you to bring to me, and right. And before that, to release the thing that is like keeping me from having this thing. The other thing that I had an interesting insight about, which I've never thought about the eighth house in this way, but right, because it is a house, it's ruled by Scorpio.
Yes.
So that house of release, it's about other people's money and all of those things, but also like it can be a house of like where we release things. So you could look at the sign that rules your eighth house. So for me, it's Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. So it would make sense that for me, writing is going to be, and write that like earthing and walking out in the woods, that those are going to be things that are really helpful for me. So if you're struggling with, well, how do I actually find out like the things that help me to release or to transform? Because it's all about transformation. Maybe take a peek at your eighth house and see what sign rules the house, and then you can very easily look up what planet. You can either just use the sign and or the planet. So for instance, mine is Virgo, it would be Mercury. What's your eighth house energy?
So my eighth house energy is in Gemini, which is also ruled by Mercury. So once again, transformational communication, and it's Gemini Sagittarius. So that's bringing through that higher visionary wisdom that I've gotten in past lives, using that in this life to communicate and cause those activations and those changes, which for me, the eighth house is transformation, death, and rebirth. It's like literally the death card right there. Sitting there just asking us, what are we willing to give up? What, we look at the death card in the tarot, and in the traditional Rider-Waite, the horse is clomping on all of the old structures, the Pluto and Aquarius energy, just like current, we're crunching it. We're getting rid of hierarchy and we're really moving to a heterarchy, a synarchy. So me, it's like, let's squish that down. Let's see how we can synergize everyone together and what are the shifts and activations that need to happen so that we can have our own internal sovereignty. And when it's funny, when we look at my nodes, there are, my south nodes connected to the galactic center. And then we've got trines and squares. So like I've got three sets of black holes in my south node, same thing in my north node. So bringing in that otherworldly, other universal energy, pulling it in, and then being able to communicate that to others. And interestingly enough, that galactic center is being able to communicate that message in a way that other people can understand. And that's been, for me, the galactic center is opposite. So it's getting activated later in life. So I would say all kinds of stuff. And I knew in my being that I was right and that I was speaking truth, and people couldn't understand me at all. It was way out there. It was too far in the future for them to be able to see that in the reality we were existing. And, as all opposites are later in life, one, I've learned that lesson of how to translate it. And also it's more pertinent now because as frequencies have shifted, so people are able to hear that more easily. And I've also learned how to communicate it in a way that they can accept it and understand it. And it's interesting because this is where the whole conversation with us started today, was about the throat chakra, about communicating. And communication is not just through the voice, right? It's through the energy field. And that's where I had to take it from being the voice to how do I put that out into my energy system and push that energy out, project that out into the world. And when people can feel that energy, it makes it easier for them to hear the vibration coming through the voice. So it's all about, once again, transforming people through communication, whether it's verbal, written, energetic, like however the energy is coming through, allowing that to be a catalyst in transformation.
Yeah. I feel like communication is such a big part of release and a big part of it's challenging sometimes, it can be because we're trying to communicate with our angels and our guides and understand what it is that's being brought forward for us. We're trying to communicate with people in our lives, whether that's romantic relationships or at work. So sometimes having those communications with people can really help you to have those releases that you're looking for. And also something that I recommend to clients a lot, either that they do on their own or sometimes we'll do it in session, is to pretend like you're talking to that other person. So a lot of times there are things that we just need to get off of our chest that the other person necessarily doesn't need to hear. So allowing yourself that space, right? If you're going for a walk or if you're doing it on paper, allowing yourself to get those thoughts and those feelings out before you actually have a conversation with somebody, because maybe you do need to have a conversation with them, right? As you're ending a relationship or as you're leaving a job, or, and it doesn't, right? A release doesn't always have to look like leaving something completely. It could be that we're releasing old patterns that we've had together, or an old way of looking at relationships, in whatever capacity that is. If you've been with somebody for 15 years, you're going to have these different phases of your relationship, and allowing space for those, I think, is really beautiful. Like something that, I think that we can do with people is we can put them into a box because of who we've known them to be. Right. So you might see this with family members as you're growing, as you're healing, as you're releasing. They expect you to be the person that you've always been. So allowing that space for other people's transformation as well, and allowing them to continue to evolve and to grow into somebody different than you might have known in the past.
Yeah, and I love that. For me, I believe that they actually do hear those conversations. If we connect to our higher self and their higher self, then that conversation can happen. And it doesn't mean that the physical conversation doesn't need to happen also, but I've started to work more on an energetic level. Like first, like something's not going right or whatever, this needs to shift, whatever it may be. That's the first step. Oh, time for an energetic conversation. Higher self, I tap into you. My guides and team come and help me. I want to speak to their higher self and allow them to also be supported by their guides and team. May this conversation be for the highest good of both of us so that we may transform in alignment with our own personal missions. And that's where, we talked about this opening and closing. Like it doesn't matter what we're doing, open that field in a manner that's protected for both of us. Have that conversation. This is how I feel. This is what I want. This is the highest good of this relationship. Or, I'm shifting. And that's where it's the I statements. I feel this way. But when we are able to kind of prep that, then it's also like, when we can have these conversations, then that's also what we're projecting. That's how we have these conversations. And I've realized that when I take full responsibility for myself and what I'm feeling and how I'm feeling in general, when I have that physical conversation, it's much different. Yeah. Because I do believe that my higher self was talking to their higher self and that they are getting that information downloaded and integrated. And as many times, I'm married, and there are sometimes I've been grumpy about things with my husband, and he is a beautiful teacher because I've realized he's helping me let go of ways that I have chosen to move in the world that were not helpful for me. And it's been a relationship that whenever I'm like, okay, let's have these higher level conversations, or universe help me, I'll get people that say, Jessica, wow, it sounds like you need to spend more time nurturing yourself. And I'm like, I already do that, but of course I do. Because as much as there's part of me that's kind of pushing against that, I hear it and I know it. And when I step into a place of more sovereignty for myself and taking care of myself, it's so fascinating. This idea, like, it is not selfish. If we take care of ourselves 1000% ourselves, and we allow ourselves to help people out of the excess that we have, those relationships transform. We are no longer putting our energetic expectations on other people and all of these other things. It's like, how am I taking care of myself? And that's really a lesson I needed to learn, because when I grew up, I was taking care of everybody else but myself. So, pretty much from early on, very early on childhood, I had this framework, and my husband helped me dismantle that and put it back together in a way that was more sovereign. So that's where, when we get all stank thinking that somebody else may be the problem, they may be literally the spotlight. The universe may have given them the big spotlight to say, Jessica, hello, this is holding you back in your life. And do you still want this? So it reminds me of the analogy with my acupuncturist. She'll poke around, and the spot that hurts the worst, that is where she is sticking the needle. And there are times where I will fly off that bed, but when I get up, I feel better. And I keep going back because I don't want to have those spots. So think about that in your life. And before we start judging people and thinking that they're wrong, when we can really step back, and somebody mentioned this word to me recently, take emotional responsibility for our actions and how we're feeling, that is liberating, because then we can have those conversations. And oftentimes for me, it's not a one-way conversation. I go in expecting, like, I want to hear what's going on. Like, talk to me. Higher self, I want to talk to their higher self. And I will get information. It's like, oh, Jessica, here's your mirror. By the way, this is what's, this is this is some of the other way that somebody else could perceive this. And when I can open myself up in a vulnerable way around that conversation and show up as the different person that has transformed since I've talked to my higher self and their higher self, that is a totally different conversation where all parties, including myself, can accept our part of it, and we can shift and grow in such a beautiful, transformative way. So it really changes the energy around things, and it harmonizes us for that conversation, which is an act of co-creation.
Yeah. As you were sharing, the other thing that was coming forward that I would love for listeners to kind of be open to, right? You don't have to listen to everything I say, but be open to it if it's hard for you. I think a lot of times it's part of, like, right, we have these milestones that we go through in our spiritual evolution. And one of those for me has been not looking at things as good or bad. I think sometimes we can, because this needs to be released, it means it's bad. It means this person is narcissistic. It means they're an asshole. It means this job is horrible. No, it doesn't. Releasing something doesn't mean that it has to be all bad, right? There's lots of different colors of the rainbow when we're looking at a situation. It's not in alignment anymore. So as we continue to grow, as we evolve, there are going to be things that aren't in alignment with who we either are in this moment or who we are wanting to become. So I think also releasing that that judgment towards it, instead of it being bad, having that viewpoint of, okay, this isn't in alignment anymore, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that it wasn't in alignment while it was in my life. It taught me a lot of things, and so often the biggest challenges that we have are the biggest lessons. They are the biggest blessings. They do bring the biggest shifts in us. It's Matt Kahn talked about this. It's like time over intensity. So we can have a situation that, maybe you're in a relationship for 15 years, and over that time period, you were meant to learn certain things, right? So let's just, for instance, with my romantic history. So my ex-husband and I were together for 16 years. And over those 16 years, I learned so many things. And even after we broke up, I was learning so many things about myself and how I showed up in romantic relationship. And then after I got divorced, I had a twin flame situation. It was very short, but I probably healed as much stuff with him in 4 months or whatever, however long it was, maybe a year or two, I don't even remember. But it was like a compacted period that I was actually physically with him in my life that I probably did in my 16-year relationship. It's that time over intensity. Like sometimes we have things that take a little bit longer to heal and for us to be in those situations. And other times it's something that comes in and like, it's very intense and knocks you on your ass. And it's like, it's just is coming in to kind of activate and to trigger, right? Like we need to have those things triggered for us to look at them and to heal them. So again, having that kind of open-mindedness about, well, maybe this isn't something that's bad that's leaving my life, like having that gratitude towards it, like, oh, thank you so much for, that's like, to me, that's when you've kind of up leveled in your badassery as a spiritual person, when you can actually like have that gratitude for somebody who really annoys you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, thank you so much for coming in and annoying the crap out of me. Like, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being this teacher for me. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, it reminds me of a Buddhist story where there was this High Lama and everybody loved him, would give him anything. And he had a T-boy that was terrible, would throw things at him, would curse him, was awful to him. And they're all like, Lama, you could have an amazing person that was devoted to you. And he's like, yes. And how would I learn? How would I grow? If everything around me, if everyone around me was so kind to me, how would I grow in my love and compassion for the world? So that's where I've always like, okay, who's my T-boy now? And also, you made me think of a really interesting thing too. It's not hard to let go of things that don't work, but when you are asked to release something that is working and it may no longer be in your alignment, that's a challenge. And it's interesting. So there's that aspect of it when you're asked to release something and you're like, this is no longer serving my growth. That requires a lot of trust and surrender and leaning into. And, one of our teachers did that. She said, okay, I no longer want to be in this marriage. I no longer want to have this job. I am being called to do something different. And she walked away from it because that was where her life was headed next. And doing all of that in a beautiful grace. The other aspect to that is I realize that for me, when I look at my gene keys, I've got struggle in there, I've got force, I've got discord. There's a lot of shadowy things. And that's what the gene keys show us. They show us our shadows and they also show us our highest level of siddhi. There's majesty and there's strength. So for me, I realized that when I stopped struggling against a situation, when I surrendered to knowing that this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Literally, I've had situations on multiple occasions, specifically in my job, changed in a day. Literally, I'm not going to struggle against this. I'm going to surrender to it and I'm going to allow, and I'm in a new job. I'm doing something completely different. The demands that I thought were overwhelming are all of a sudden gone. So that's the other thing to think about, when we're moving through this life is it is ease and it is surrender and it is trust. And we will not be anywhere we're not supposed to be. We'll be removed from that situation. So just think about that. I mean, I've even had that in relationships where it's like, this relationship is really hard. And all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I don't think it's working. I'm like, wow, that's so easy. Great. Like, please go and grow. And I'm going to go and grow. So it doesn't have to be a big explosion. It doesn't have to be a tower moment where everything is getting torn down and destroyed. But that was me. I was like, I'm going to lean into the tower and like, boom. It doesn't have to be. It can actually be so beautifully easy that it will change your life. And that's where some of the hardest situations in my life, when I surrendered to them and they shifted, have been those moments where I know there is something greater than me out there. The universe is looking over me and caring for me. And I don't have to worry about anything else. Like, I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to do.
Yeah. And the other thing that I can't even remember where I heard this at some point, but I think this is really powerful to remember this. If it's not in alignment for you, it's not in alignment for the other person either,
Oh,
right?
nice.
If you're staying at a job or you're staying in a relationship that is not in alignment and you're feeling that, the other person or the other situation is also feeling that and experiencing it. You can't have it on one side and not have it on the other. Maybe they're not ready to let it go, but sometimes, right, we have to be the person to say like, all right, and I'll be honest with you, right? When my ex-husband told me he wanted to get divorced, I was not prepared for that. Like, I was in a place in my life that it was one of the hardest things I've ever heard. And it brought up so many things for me, but in hindsight, I often say like, it was the greatest gift that he ever gave me. Like, and I'm not being mean or snarky about that at all. Like, it was the greatest present he ever gave me because I would have stayed in the relationship, even though it wasn't right. We weren't in alignment for each other anymore. So I think it can help us when we are in those transition phases to look at it that way. Like, it's not just that I'm feeling this way. It's probably that the other person is also feeling this way on some level, right? Maybe they don't fully understand it yet. Maybe we have more awareness than they do, whatever it is. Yeah, just for me, like, understanding that has been helpful because, right, we don't want to hurt people. Again, the fear comes up, like all of these factors come into it, but ultimately it is the universe loves us. The universe is taking care of us. These things are meant to be moved through in a way that we're going to learn and grow from.
Yeah, I love that. I've not actually heard that. And that just brings up so much for me because I look back on situations that I left or I was kind of forced out of, and there was like, they have thrived and I have thrived. So 1000% yes, we get comfortable We get comfortable in good situations. We get comfortable in mediocre situations. And maybe that thing that was there for our growth then becomes comfortable. Well, stagnation, when the body becomes stagnant, it becomes diseased. When our energy becomes stagnant, we did not decide to take on this 3D existence for stagnation. We actually came to be in the densest form of matter to shift it. And for many of us that are star seeds, like, one, this is probably the hardest assignment we've ever had. Even for those of us that have been doing this, how many times have we been on this earth doing this thing? I know I have done it a lot. Doesn't make it easier, but we have come to transform this density to bring in our own unique codes and knowledge and information and frequencies to help the earth and humanity make this shift. And, there's a critical mass. We've got over 8 billion people on this planet, and that's probably the most that's ever inhabited it. And for me, I'm just like, wow, think of all the souls that chose to come here, all the star seeds that are here now at this one time. It's like a grand reunion of souls, along with all the people of the earth that are shifting this consciousness. So this is a huge time of release. Like, we are a spirit and we are a body. So if we think about the ancestral release of the body and everything with this earth, and that's where, we can be called to release things that may not feel like our own. Well, if you're a star seed, you're inhabiting an earth body. So you chose this earth lineage, this body, to release and clean out in a very quick manner, whatever may have happened in that ancestry. And I've had people come to me and they say, I feel so bad about my ancestry and all the horrible things they did. And I was like, yeah, that's why you chose that ancestry, to clear it out. So don't allow what needs to be released to feel overwhelming to you. Your soul chose this. It was empowered to do it. You've gained all the tools and skills to do it. So say, yep, this is a huge freaking mess. And I chose to be here right now to clean it up, whether that's ancestral, whether that's spiritual, whether that's physical. I choose to work in a very dense, federal environment. People are like, why would you do that? Because what needs more shifting and changing than the government? Like, every place that we are is on purpose, shifting ourselves, those around us, and the environment. We are here to bring awareness. And so that, yes, you chose that. You chose to transform it, and you can. You have the ability to do it. Just call in all your people. Call in your future selves to come in, your parallel selves to come in and help you make these shifts, because there is a place somewhere in the future where you already know that this has been resolved and you know how you did it. So tap into that awareness and that guidance and that wisdom and transform the hell out of it. And it may also mean that, that transformation takes time and you're in it for a long time. And it's not like you're doing anything wrong. You're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, I love that, because it's something that's been helping me. Like, the last couple of years have been challenging in a lot of ways for me. I think we have those periods of life, right, where we're learning certain things, we're healing from certain things, and really tuning into that future version of myself and just seeing that I've overcome it. Like, tapping into that part of yourself can be really helpful, because we can get really bogged down in our current situation and like, oh God, am I doing the right thing? Is this ever going to change? Am I going to be stuck here forever? Like, that's one of the things that comes up for me, is like, oh my God, I don't want to be dealing with this in 5 years, or, whatever it is that my brain tells me. But tuning into that future, that energetic version of your future self, it can give you that peace where you're like, okay, I know that I overcome this. I know that this is something that I'm meant to be moving through and learning towards and kind of evolving through. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful point that you made.
Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to get discouraged and disheartened. And that's, for me, everything's either heart is open or heart is closed. We want to have heart open all the time. We want to have heart open all the time. Say it one more time. We want to have heart open all of the time, and to feel safe in our being, to have heart open all the time. And am I able to do that? No, but that actually is like the ultimate goal, is to have heart open all the time, to feel safe and protected in my own beingness. Because safe and protected is actually a state of mind. It's a state of being. When we can like sit into that flow, we're untouchable. Heart is open. So looking at that, paying attention, when does heart close? And then when heart closes, okay, heart is closed. What do I need to do to help that heart? It's not like, okay, I'm heart open. No, it's like, oh, heart is closed. So this, where I'm at right now, has caused heart to close. I'm going to retreat. And that's, I keep going back to the gene keys, but I'm feeling it today. That's one of my gene keys, is like, when you're faced with a huge mountain and, you know, it feels as though you're going to be succumbed to the despair, turn, retreat, find solace, seek guidance, seek community, allow heart open, and then come back to the situation with a new realization and with a community of support.
Yeah.
So like, yes, it's okay. It's okay to be super courageous and be like, I'm coming in. And then when heart closes, oh, okay. It's okay to retreat and say, oh, the most important thing is heart open. The most important thing is that as I move forward in my life, heart is open. So if heart closes, I'm going to pay attention. Why did heart close? What do I need to do to heal, to protect, to feel safe, so that I can once again leave out there with heart open? How do I gather my community of supports, both seen and unseen? We're not here alone. Loneliness is one of the biggest things, and that's, you know, in isolation.
Yeah.
But it's not true. It's not true. In this beautiful global age, you know, where we can talk to people all over the earth through a variety of means, we are not alone. And for me, even if I'm alone somewhere in the woods, like I can tap into that and feel earth and feel humanity, and then feel all of my guides. And the, you know, the hawk will sit right in front of me. I am not alone. So look out there for all the signs that tell us we're not alone, that we are supported. Look for those synchronicities, allow them to heal and allow heart to open, and then move from the heart open space. And if the heart isn't open, then don't move forward, because it may take days, it may take months. Heart is closed. Okay. So sit with that. That's kind of like the hanged man in the tarot. This is not the time to do anything, because the most important thing is getting that heart open. So if we, and I'm learning this more and more, if I only move from a place where the heart is open into situations that allow the heart to be open, it shifts my reality. It also cuts my moving by like 50%. There's a lot more not moving. And that's okay, because I went to move and then heart closes. Okay, well, we're not moving there. Oh, we're not moving there. So I guess heart is open and I'm going to sit here and I'm happy with it. And I will know when I'm called to move. So that's just, this open-hearted living is the revolution, is the sovereignty of our being and how we're moving in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think you just said it all there. We've just solved all the problems of the world.
Oh, it's
I mean, it's true though. Like, I'm being a smart ass kind of, but not really. I mean, it's true. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's, I don't talk about it often because it's a little wild, I think, but it's like, it's what's been on my heart. It's what's been living there for a while. It's just like, heart open, heart open.
Yeah. And I think for me, certainly, I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I think the more that I am in my sovereignty and in my energy, I am able to come back to that a lot easier. Like, it used to take me a lot longer. I would get knocked out of it, and you know, it would take me a while to kind of come back into my heart space. But yeah, so if you're feeling discouraged about that and it's hard for you, right? It's something that, I mean, it's still challenging for me.
It's still challenging
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's, I'll quote the Dalai Lama. You know, the Dalai Lama says, and he was specifically talking about working with anger. He's like, it's about noticing it. And if we can notice it and not judge it. So he's like, yeah, we may get angry about something, and then 8 hours later, we realize that we're angry and we want to do something about it. And then it may take us another 8 hours to work on that. And he's like, that's okay. So if you then get angry and you realize it after 7 hours and it takes you another 8 hours, you still saved 1 hour. So that's where we're looking at this on a grand scale. And that's where I can be gentle and compassionate with myself. Do I have this figured out? Absolutely not. But what I can say is more often than not, I am more aware of when the heart closes.
Mm.
When I make a decision, I actually drop into that space intentionally and say, okay, yes or no, and heart open or heart close. So I'm using it more as a guidance point. But it didn't just like spontaneously occur to me to do this. Like, you know, Richard Rudd talks about this in the Gene Keys a lot in the Venus sequence. What do we need to do to nurture ourselves to our heart being open?
Mm.
So it was me listening to somebody else and saying, oh, that's a great idea. Let me start doing that now. And it is all with gentleness, you know, allow, embrace, accept. It's a gentle journey. It's a gentle journey. Do I have it right all the time? No. I'm more aware and I seek. That's my intention, to seek out open-hearted living. The more I'm able to do it, I see it shift my life. And even like when I say the more I do it, like even a little bit, like the more I'm able to do it 10%, when I look out at my reality, it is huge shifts. So don't be discouraged. It actually feels safer for me to be in the heart and be with the heart.
Yeah.
But don't be discouraged. The gains now are exponential for all of us. And we're all just taking baby steps. That's 3D reality is baby steps. When we get a quantum leap, hooray. But it is super baby steps. And then we trip and fall and land in the mud and roll around a little bit. But it doesn't like, and that may happen. Hey, we may roll around the mud for years. But the minute we get up and say, oh, I was in the mud, that is a win. Like, oh, I've got some mud on me. Great. I didn't see that before. Like being able to see those places that we need to heal, that's a win. Instead of like, for me, it was like, oh God, I used to feel shame and guilt, shame spiral. And then it was like, then I'm in that for a while and like blah, blah, blah. And it would be like months of just wallowing and feeling horrible and awful and being mean to myself.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, there's a big ass boil or a lot of mud. Like, thank God I saw that. Or like Robin's like, you got all this shit on you. Wow. Thank God. Now I can work on cleaning it off so I'm not walking around smelling all the time. Like, great. Like, oh, you got a piece of spinach in your teeth. Great. I don't have to have that anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, for me, it's this gratitude when somebody's like, wow, blah, 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 whatever they're projecting on me, is there truth to it? Okay, let me look at that truth. And I don't feel any type of way about it. It's like, oh, okay, great. Next area for a growth edge. Lean into that thing. So that's what I can say that I've done is I have transformed that shame cycle with love. And when we're able to do that, and did not happen overnight, took years, stop myself in the shame cycle. I'm not going to beat myself up anymore. I love myself. I'm going to open to this. All of this stuff takes time and it's worth it. But when we can be more gentle with ourselves, we can then see when our heart is shut down and how to move forward from there.
Yeah. Thank you. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I don't thank you all for joining us.
Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time with In the Flow.
Bye.
I can see the stars align, dance around the moon every night. And now my eyes are open wide, and the sky has never looked so bright. Now I don't need to see the road to believe, to believe.